Hello everyone. The full patch notes for patch 7.1 has just dropped. Let's take a look at what changed for every job, as well as my thoughts and analysis for the changes. Starting off with the tanks, all their inbound actions will now be applied more quickly. So probably less memes of using your inbound and dying immediately because the inbound needed a bit more time before it comes into effect. I'm looking at you, O Super Bolite. For Paladin, cover's range gets extended to 20 yalms. It's not a bad change. I myself have encountered issues whereby I'm just out of range to cover my healer, but this also means it's harder to use cover for tank swaps now, since you need to go pretty far to break the tether. Then again, this is a very niche tech, so I doubt many paladins will be unhappy about this change. Intervene, the gap closer, is now acquired at level 66 instead of 74. It's still the latest among all the tanks to get their gap closers, but this means that every tank will have their gap closers by Stormblood, which is very good. This also means that Paladin will have their gap closers for UCOP and Uru, which is very helpful. It's also a slight DPS buff for these fights, since Intervene does damage, so Paladins rejoice. Dark Knight got a lot of changes here, though they are mainly getting much needed utility changes instead of a gameplay rework that many players are hoping for. Dark Mind and Dark Missionary now gives physical damage reduction instead of just magical damage reduction. The physical component is only half of what the magical component gives, but this means you have a slight flexibility to your meats. I don't play Dark Knight in high-end content, but I would imagine this doesn't really change things all that much for raiding, since you still want to save these for magical attacks. If you can use it for free, like using it to meet autos, and it's still coming in time for magical tank busters, healers would appreciate it. On the more casual side of things, this helps a lot for dungeon pools, and is especially useful between level 45 and level 70 when you don't have TBN yet. This is overall a really good change. Dark Missionary is also now acquired at level 66 instead of 76. This means that it's available for the Stormblood ultimates. No more feeling bad about being the only tank that doesn't have an AoE party mate in Uru and UCOP. This has been a long time coming and it's finally here. Craft and Speed, the action that shares a recast timer with Abyssal Drain, now heals the Dark Knight. Abyssal Drain's heal potency has also been boosted to the same amount of 500 potency, which is nice. The heal on Craft and Speed is nice, functioning kinda like Paladin's heals from their magical attacks. But design-wise though, I don't really see the point of it. The name's called Craft and Speed, not Craft and Solo, if you get what I mean. Also, I think it would have been nice if they made the healing potency more than Abyssal Drains. At least from a design standpoint, the single target abilities usually have a stronger effect. It's honestly a nothing burger, but I just find it kinda weird. Apart from these changes, Dark Knights also received potency bars for Blood Spiller, Scarlet Delirium, Comeuppance, and Tor Cleaver. Dark Knight was already the DPS king amongst the tanks, so these buffs are going to widen the gaps even more. Gunbreaker has gotten some rather big changes, but they don't really affect gameplay too much. First, like Dark Knight, their AoE party mitigation Heart of Light will also reduce physical damage taken by 5%. It's nice, but I don't really see much use of this, since there are so much instances of red-white magic damage that you want to use Heart of Light for. Second, Super Bolite now reduces your HP only to 50% of your max HP instead of just 1. Just to note, there's a discrepancy here between the patch notes and the job guide. In the patch notes, it says HP will be reduced to 50% of the maximum, but in the job guide, it says that HP is reduced by 50% of the maximum. I'm hoping that is the latter, because there's something cool about being at 1 HP and being invulnerable. And there's a certain level of skill to it. Better Gunbreakers will use it at lower health points in order to maximize their invulnerability, but if it's the former, then well, that just kinda sucks the fun out of the button, I guess. It won't be the worst thing in the world, but it was fun to Super Bolite, cancel the inbound, and die to grief the healers. The last and biggest change is that Double Down now costs 1 cartridge instead of 2. Honestly, I'm surprised that they didn't rename it to Single Down, since the flavor is completely gone now. Personally, I find this change really lame, as it kinda removes what made Double Down unique, apart from the name obviously. Requiring 2 cartridges does mean that it requires you to plan your rotation around it. But that's the fun part of playing gauge classes, making sure that you have enough gauge in order to do your bursts. Now everything requires only 1 cartridge. I guess this makes playing Gunbreaker less punishing, but I think it wasn't worth it. I've not played Gunbreaker in endgame content since Shadowbringers, and I know that Gunbreaker have it rough this tier due to all the downtime, which resulted in less cartridge generation, but I don't think this was the solution. But if Gunbreakers actually like this change, do let me know. I'm quite curious what Gunbreaker mains have to say. To compensate for this change, Hyper Velocity's potency got reduced slightly. The devs have said that it's still an overall buff for Gunbreakers, so we'll see how it goes. Oh, and Aurora got a pure potency boost as well. That's nice. Dragoon also got some pretty big changes. First of all, using Elusive Jump now grants you enhanced piercing talent, which makes your next piercing talent do more damage. Dragoons are basically like Samurai now. I think Dragoons needed some ranged GCD tools to deal with all the downtime, so this kinda helps with the problem. But I don't really like this solution, as it just makes Dragoon's disengage feel like a copy of Samurai. Maybe they should have just made Wormwind Thrust a GCD and made Elusive Jump give you a free use of it, just like in PvP. This just feels uninspired. It's a good change that rewards skillful use of Elusive Jump, but I think it could have been more interesting. Piercing Talent's base damage also got increased, so that's very nice. Next, Dragoons now only have one use of Nestron instead of 3. This was to reduce the number of actions executed during burst windows. On one hand, I feel that Dragoon was slightly too busy during the 2-minute windows, but on the other hand, managing OGCDs were what made Dragoon fun, and is arguably their job identity at this point. I'm personally not a big fan of this change. Now Nestron is just another standard 60 seconds button that you press. The gameplay of trying to spam as many Nestrons as you can within your burst from previous expansions is now completely gone, which is a shame. To account for this change, Nestron's potency got doubled to 720, which might seem weird, but they probably didn't want Nestron to do more damage than Stardiver. Other parts of Dragoon's kit got compensated instead, as Mirage Dive, Stardiver, and Starcross got potency bumps. Speaking of Starcross, it also now has a range of 20 yalms instead of being a weird melee jump action. This is a good change that makes Dragoon less clunky during burst windows, especially those ones where you need to disengage and re-engage, but it should have worked like this in the first place. Ninja is yet another job with big changes. First, Dokomori is AoE. This is kind of a weird change since the animation for Dokomori looked like an AoE move in the first place, but it's here. We can finally use mark in dungeon runs and not feel bad. And it's also a big W for raiding, since we can now mark 2 targets instead of just 1. Such a small change, but one that will make a huge impact. You can now move when using Tenchi Jin. I'm not a big fan of this change. I can understand why they did it, as I myself have encountered issues of needing to move when using TCJ. Heck, in the first fight of this tier, if you follow the standard opener, you will need to move during your TCJ as well. But the fun part of using TCJ is finding a spot where you can stay still, and also trying to move your ability timings to fit it in. If it's not possible to use TCJ without moving at this time, then can we shift it forward or backward to fit the fight? TCJ is my favourite ninja ability since it has so much optimization potential. I'm disappointed that the skill expression it provides is gone. I think what they should have done is to make TCJ have a 100 seconds or 110 seconds cooldown instead, so we can freely shift it within our burst windows without it affecting the timings of the next burst windows. Yet another action loses its unique identity. Other than this, we got potency buffs for Throwing Dagger and Room Within the Dream. Not much to say for these. The change for DWD is kinda random, since Ninja is already near the top RDPS wise, but whatever, free damage is free damage I guess. For Samurai, Hisatsu Gyoten, the dash, now has a cooldown of just 5 seconds. It's a very nice QOL, and I think it's definitely needed with more fights receiving downtime. Gyofu and Zanshin also got slight potency bumps, which might make it slightly more competitive than Viper, though they're already very close RDPS wise. Reapers got jacked this patch. Don't let these changes fool you. These are just UI changes to help remind you to end your enshroud with a communal. And it's also to fix some Dancer Reaper Arcane Circle interactions. That's it. Machinist received buff to Heated Clean Shot, Blazing Shot, Double Check and Checkmate. Flamethrower also got both a range and damage buff, so that's something. It would be nice if Flamethrower actually did something useful though. Dancer's Curing Warp's AoE got a range bump from 3 to 5 yalms. Just a neat QOL change. Other than that, Fan Dance and Fan Dance 3 got buffed, nothing really interesting there. The Dancer and Machinist buffs should help close the gap between the 3 range jobs, though Machinist should be bumped up quite a bit more since their damage buffs were more substantial. Black Mage is also another job that got big changes. First, Flash cast time has been reduced from 4 to 3 seconds. That's very nice. Second, ley lines now have 2 charges, and the cooldown remains at 120 seconds. This change gives Black Mage a lot more flexibility, since it is now easier to shift ley lines away from burst windows if needed, especially if you want to push it earlier from the burst window. This change is just a big W. Leyline still has 120 seconds cooldown however, so black mages will now have to make sure not to overcap it, though I don't think this is much of an issue. Thirdly, Despair is now instant cast when you're in Astral Fire. Take note that this trait is only for level 100 black mages, so you'll still be in Despair in lower level content. This is a big win for black mages. Oh, and Enhanced Enochian got a slight potency reduction, probably to control black mages damage. According to the devs, black mages should still do more overall DPS. I'm not a black mage main, but I would imagine they are probably celebrating right now. A huge W for black mages this patch. For Summoner, the Crimson Cyclone and Crimson Strike, the melee GCDs after summoning Ifrit, are no longer a combo. This just makes their Ifrit phase slightly more flexible. This is another change where I'm like, why are they removing the unique parts of the kit? I quite like having to plan for these 5 seconds of forced melee. Somehow, they made Summoner even easier. The summon actions also have their potencies properly increased, along with Sunflare. Red mages got potency bumps to Verflare, Verholy, Scorch, and Resolution. Quite straightforward here. All these potency bumps should bring the magic DPSs closer to Picto, though Picto will still probably be ahead by a long shot. Speaking of Pictomancer, their motifs are now painted automatically when you enter an instance or reset an encounter. No more memes where you forgot to draw. Hooray! And Pictomancer didn't get any nerfs, as to be expected from FF14's development team. Okay, we're down to the last stretch now. I will have to give a disclaimer, I don't play healers at all, so forgive me if my analysis here is much more tame in comparison to the ones above. Of note, Esuna is now instant cast for all healers. A very nice change, not sure if it was really needed, but it definitely helps in fights like in T, where you need to cleanse debuffs. Also, this probably means that we are going to have to use Esuna in FRU, just like back in EAS. For white mages, Holy and Holy Tree's cast time has been reduced from 2.5 seconds to 1.5 seconds. I'm kinda iffy on this change, since the distinction between Holy and Astrologian's gravity is now even blurrer. I've always felt it to be clunky to be unable to cast OGCDs in the middle of Holy spamming without clipping. I know I would like it, but I don't know if I should like it. Their level 100 capstone ability, Divine Caress, got a range buff from 15 to 30 yalms, which was needed since there was a lot of damage instances where the party was spread out all over the arena. Also, Glare 3 got buffed, along with Afflictor's Misery, so it remains damage neutral. Waller received MP cost reductions across the board, with proper healing potency bumps on Embrace and Seraphic Veil. For Astrologian, the AoE size for Gravity and Gravity 2 has been increased. Just a nice QOL change, since enemy targeting can be uncooperative sometimes. This just makes it easier when fighting groups of enemies, especially when there are larger enemies amongst the targets. Lastly, for Sage, they also got MP cost reductions across the board, and like White Mage, their level 100 capstone ability got a much needed range buff to 30 yalms. Dosis 3, Toxicon, and Numa, which are Sage's standard damaging actions, all got slightly buffed as well. According to my healer friends, the MP cost reduction for the shield healers, Scholar and Sage, are likely to make dual shielders or solo healer content like Criterion more viable. Hayati is also apparently a big issue on Beast, whereby healers don't really want to race on any fights longer than 8 minutes with no downtime. So these mana changes should help to make recovering as a shield healer via GCD pure healing less taxing. And that's it for the PVE changes this patch. I thought most of the changes were boring and stripped away the unique identities of jobs. There were potency buffs, but at what cost? At the very least, Black Mage seems to be the winner of this patch, receiving very useful QOL changes. But what does everyone else think? I would like to hear your thoughts. That's it for this video, and I hope you find it useful. See ya!